Four black SUVs pull into the dusty streets of Millbrook, Arizona, targeting 19-year-old Anna Brooks in a bold attempt to force her grandmother, Harriet, to hand over critical DA evidence. The cartel believes this will be an easy job. Abduct the girl, leverage the evidence, and silence anyone in their way. Their critical mistake? Underestimating Buzz, the family's loyal dog who once served as Ghost, an elite military canine with 3 combat tours, 57 confirmed neutralizations, an instinct sharper than any human operative. What begins as a quiet afternoon escalates into a violent showdown as Harriet, fueled by fierce determination and unbreakable love for her granddaughter, partners with Buzz to take on a cartel with everything to lose. By nightfall, a criminal empire will tremble, lives will be changed forever, and a retired war dog will remind the world why some soldiers never truly retire. This gripping story of courage, loyalty, and justice proves that sometimes the strongest guardian has 4 legs, an unyielding heart, and a lifetime of combat experience. Millbrook, Arizona, known mostly as a quiet border-adjacent town where the sun beats down relentlessly and saguaro cacti stand silent guard along the desert highways. Most folks who live here do so because they've grown to love the scorched land, the sprawling desert skies, and the feeling of small-town community. Hardly anyone in this corner of the state expects the sort of trouble that plagues bigger cities across the border in Mexico. It was a place of routine, of small joys, and a backdrop of wide-open spaces. No one outside a few suspicious souls ever suspected that the tendrils of a powerful Mexican cartel had begun to weave through Millbrook's dusty streets. Fewer still knew that somewhere in the heart of this unassuming township lay dangerous evidence that could topple the illicit operations of that cartel. And among those who did know, some were willing to protect it with their lives. The secrets coiled around the story of a teenage girl, a retired war dog, and a grandmother who had sacrificed everything to guard what the Drug Enforcement Administration needed to put away the cartel's kingpins. The grandmother's courage was the silent kind, born from living a life under threat, from seeing injustices done, and from burying more loved ones than any person should have to. The teenage girl, unassuming, with a streak of stubborn resolve, was about to have her world upended in a single afternoon. And then there was the dog. The watchers from the cartel had eyes on the old ranch property and had seen the canine in glimpses, a large, stoic figure, milk chocolate coat marred by scars that told stories of battles left unspoken. They assumed it was just an ordinary pet, a family dog, perhaps one that might bark, nip, or run around if spooked. What they didn't realize was that this dog had served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan with the U.S. military's elite canine unit, racking up an impressive record of confirmed enemy neutralizations. He'd been called Ghost by the servicemen and women who relied on him. There were entire squads, special operations teams, that owed him their lives. But now he was just Buzz to a teenage girl. And that single oversight, underestimating a dog, would spell the unraveling of a mission that the cartel believed would be easy. 4 black SUVs, tinted windows glinting under the Arizona sun, began their approach. Their destination, Millbrook High School, where a 19-year-old girl walked every day with the easy confidence of someone who felt safe in her hometown. They would soon learn that safety is a concept that cuts both ways, and that the desert holds its own brand of retribution. Quick pause before we continue. Welcome to Fabled Frames. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, cause tomorrow's story is going to be mind-blowing. Buzz, come on boy, let's go, called Anna Brooks. She was 19 but finishing up her high school senior year after taking a semester off to help her grandmother recover from hip surgery. That morning, she threw a worn leather backpack over her shoulder as she prepared to leave for class. Buzz, a Belgian Malinois with a coat that had turned slightly grayer around a muzzle, trotted up to her side. He moved with a disciplined grace that belied his age. He was well trained, though Anna didn't realize just how deeply that training went. Her grandmother, Harriet, had hinted at it once or twice, something about specialized obedience commands. But Harriet rarely told the full story, and Anna never pressed too hard. "You can't come to class with me," Anna teased. "But I'll walk with you to the corner." "Deal." Buzz let out a small huff, tail wagging in a slow, deliberate rhythm as he followed her to the front door. Millbrook mornings were crisp, especially outside the winter months, but the desert heat always threatened to rise quickly, forcing Anna to shrug off her light jacket by mid-morning. She gave her grandmother a quick hug. Harriet was sipping coffee in the kitchen, eyes distant, as if worried about something. "Gran, everything okay?" Anna asked, noticing how her grandmother's usually confident gaze kept flicking to the window. Harriet forced a smile. "You worry too much, dear. Have a good day at school, and remember, don't linger too long after classes. If you need anything, call me, and I'll send Buzz." That last part was odd. Send Buzz? Harriet acted as if Buzz were a personal bodyguard, not just a sweet old dog. But Anna brushed it off. "Sure thing." Anna stepped onto the porch. The family ranch, once bustling with horses and the occasional stray cat, was now quiet. While they kept some goats and chickens for fresh milk and eggs, they had downsized over the years. She made her way down the gravel driveway with Buzz padding beside her, unwavering. He seemed almost on alert, glancing at the horizon, sniffing the breeze. She stopped at the main road corner where she always turned left toward the school. Buzz, knowing the routine, stood watching her. "Stay," she said gently, giving him a farewell pat. He had never once disobeyed that command. Anna walked off toward the school, earbuds in place, favorite music helping her mentally prepare for another day of classes. Meanwhile, Buzz remained still, not returning to the house just yet. Instead, he gazed after Anna until she disappeared from view, then slowly trotted back home. At the ranch, Harriet had moved to the living room, adjusting the blinds to look outside. She caught sight of Buzz returning. Her heart eased a little. She might have known the dog for only 2 years, adopted after his retirement, but Harriet was fully aware of the lethal skill set hidden beneath that calm canine exterior. She recalled vividly the day a friend, a local veterans organization, had confided that Ghost needed a quiet place to live out his post-service life. Harriet had recognized an opportunity, not just to do the dog a kindness, but to find an ally in her clandestine struggle. She breathed deeply. Today was a normal day, she told herself. There would be no trouble. But the slightest worry persisted at the edges of her mind. It wasn't until the black SUVs rolled into the outskirts of Millbrook that the biggest threat to Harriet's secrets took its most tangible form. There were 4 vehicles in total, each with tinted windows, forging a menacing column of dark steel across the desert highway. Inside the lead SUV sat Ernesto El Veneno Chavez, a mid-level operator in the cartel's hierarchy. His name, the Venom, came from the silent efficiency he showed in wiping out anyone who crossed his bosses. He was tall, with a faded scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his jaw. A quiet man who preferred action to words, he stared straight ahead, one hand resting on the console, the other occasionally tapping a Sig Sauer pistol strapped to his thigh. Next to him was his second-in-command, Jorge, slighter of build, with darting eyes that missed nothing. On the seat behind him were 2 more men, each bristling with tattoos and unspoken threats. The other SUVs carried more foot soldiers, cartel men with rifles stashed in cases, all well-versed in smuggling, intimidation, and abductions. Their mission sounded straightforward enough. They had intelligence that Harriet Brooks possessed hidden DEA documents that could severely compromise cartel operations along the border. Intelligence further suggested that Harriet had one close family member, her granddaughter, Anna. Cartel leadership had concluded that grabbing the granddaughter was the fastest way to compel Harriet's cooperation. The operation was planned meticulously over weeks of surveillance. One detail was overlooked, however, or at least discounted: the dog. Their photos showed the girl walking a large Belgian Malinois around the property, but the men had chalked it up to a mere pet. Anna was the main focus. Her dog, if it intervened at all, would be handled easily. At least that was their assumption. Ernesto pulled out his phone, checking a satellite map of the town. Millbrook High School was about 2 miles ahead, a squat collection of low buildings in a dusty expanse. "We do this clean," he muttered in Spanish, glancing at Jorge. "Grab her fast. No messing around." Jorge nodded. "Sí, boss. We'll have an exit route prepared. The second safe house is just across the state line. Then we bring her south." They had agreed on a mid-afternoon timing. Anna would be at school, unsuspecting. They would approach quietly, possibly wait until school let out, and seize her near the parking lot or along the sidewalk. The plan was to whisk her away before anyone could react. After that, Harriet would be given a single ultimatum: hand over the DEA evidence or lose her granddaughter forever. In Ernesto's mind, this was just another job. Millbrook was a small, forgettable place. If they acted efficiently, they'd be back over the border before local law enforcement realized what had happened. He stared at his watch, the tension in his jaw relaxing into a slight smirk. If everything went according to plan, Anna Brooks would be in their custody by sundown. It wasn't until the black SUVs rolled into the outskirts of Millbrook that the biggest threat to Harriet's secrets took its most tangible form. There were 4 vehicles in total, each with tinted windows, forging a menacing column of dark steel across the desert highway. Inside the lead SUV sat Ernesto Elvanino Chavez, a mid-level operator in the cartel's hierarchy. His name, the Venom, came from the silent efficiency he showed in wiping out anyone who crossed his bosses. He was tall, with a faded scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his jaw. A quiet man who preferred action to words, he stared straight ahead, one hand resting on the console, the other occasionally tapping a Sig Sauer pistol strapped to his thigh. Next to him was his second-in-command, Jorge, slighter of build, with darting eyes that missed nothing. On the seat behind him were 2 more men, each bristling with tattoos and unspoken threats. The other SUVs carried more foot soldiers, cartel men with rifles stashed in cases, all well-versed in smuggling, intimidation, and abductions. Their mission sounded straightforward enough. They had intelligence that Harriet Brooks possessed hidden DEA documents that could severely compromise cartel operations along the border. Intelligence further suggested that Harriet had one close family member, her granddaughter, Anna. Cartel leadership had concluded that grabbing the granddaughter was the fastest way to compel Harriet's cooperation. The operation was planned meticulously over weeks of surveillance. One detail was overlooked, however, or at least discounted: the dog. Their photos showed the girl walking a large Belgian Malinois around the property, but the men had chalked it up to a mere pet. Anna was the main focus. Her dog, if it intervened at all, would be handled easily. At least that was their assumption. Ernesto pulled out his phone, checking a satellite map of the town. Millbrook High School was about 2 miles ahead, a squat collection of low buildings in a dusty expanse. "We do this clean," he muttered in Spanish, glancing at Jorge. "Grab her fast. No messing around." Jorge nodded. "Sí, boss. We'll have an exit route prepared. The second safe house is just across the state line. Then we bring her south." They had agreed on a mid-afternoon timing. Anna would be at school, unsuspecting. They would approach quietly, possibly wait until school let out, and seize her near the parking lot or along the sidewalk. The plan was to whisk her away before anyone could react. After that, Harriet would be given a single ultimatum: hand over the DEA evidence or lose her granddaughter forever. In Ernesto's mind, this was just another job. Millbrook was a small, forgettable place. If they acted efficiently, they'd be back over the border before local law enforcement realized what had happened. He stared at his watch, the tension in his jaw relaxing into a slight smirk. If everything went according to plan, Anna Brooks would be in their custody by sundown. By noon, the Arizona sun had climbed high, bathing the Millbrook High School courtyard in harsh light. Students came and went, some seeking shade under the sparse trees that dotted the campus. Anna sat on a low wall near the cafeteria, picking at a turkey sandwich and scrolling through her phone. She texted her grandmother, "Hey, Gran, do you need anything from the store on my way back?" Within minutes came a reply, "No, just come straight home after school." Harriet added an emoji heart at the end. Anna smiled at the screen but couldn't shake a faint sense of unease. Something about her grandmother's messages today felt off, like Harriet was on edge, and it trickled down to Anna. She chalked it up to the older woman's normal worries. The campus felt subdued that afternoon. A wave of intangible tension hung in the air. A friend of Anna's, a girl named Melissa, glanced at the row of cars parked beyond the chain-link fence. She squinted. "Hey, Anna, do you know who owns those black SUVs over there? Looks super shady." Anna followed her friend's gaze. Two large SUVs, black and with tinted windows, were parked just outside the school gates. The building security or resource officer usually patrolled, but no one was near them at the moment. "Weird," Anna murmured. "Probably some visitors or something. Or maybe FBI stuff," she joked. Yet something in her gut twisted. The presence of the vehicles was oddly menacing. "Let's go inside where it's cooler," Melissa suggested. Anna nodded, grateful to escape the sun and the sight of the strange vehicles. They entered the cafeteria, found a table near the air conditioning vent, and tried to laugh off any lingering apprehension. Across the street, in one of the SUVs, Ernesto watched from behind the tinted window. His dark eyes followed Anna's every movement. He was gauging the environment, how many security cameras, the presence of staff or other students, any obstacles that might complicate a quick abduction. The plan was still forming in his mind. Wait until final bell, watch which direction the girl walked, then corner her. He took a drag of a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "We'll grab her near that side road," he told Jorge. "We don't want to do it inside the school grounds. Too many witnesses. We'll block her path, pull her in, and be gone before anyone calls the cops." Jorge nodded, scanning a small handheld device that jammed frequencies. They would use it right before the grab to prevent calls or texts from going out immediately. Their exit route was a quiet side street that led to a back road away from the main thoroughfare. They had a second pair of SUVs waiting there to swap vehicles, further confusing any potential pursuers. In another SUV, a younger cartel member tested a tranquilizer gun. He had a few vials of sedative in a small foam container. The plan was to subdue Anna if she panicked or resisted too violently. They needed her mostly unharmed so Harriet would cooperate. The entire operation was set to unfold in a matter of hours. And ironically, none of them felt any concern about a teenage girl's dog. Back at the ranch, Harriet paced across the living room. On the coffee table lay an unassuming manila folder. Inside were documents containing names, transaction records, photographs of high-ranking cartel members with corrupt law enforcement officials. It was a trove that Harriet's late husband had stumbled upon in his days as a DEA informant. Over time, Harriet had added her own gleaned intel. She had kept the records hidden, not trusting even the local DEA branch after a scare in which a leak nearly exposed her identity. That folder was Harriet's armor against the cartel. She knew if they ever discovered her involvement, they might come after Anna. Indeed, Harriet had watched suspicious vehicles cruise by the ranch in recent weeks. Dark windows, slow rolling. She had done her best to appear uninteresting, but she felt certain the cartel was circling. She paused and looked at Buzz, who rested on the floor near her feet. He stared back with an intensity that was almost human. Harriet couldn't ignore a gut feeling that trouble was near and that ghost Buzz would be needed. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the folder and slid it into a hidden compartment in the old armoire. She triple-checked the latch, then placed a decorative cloth over the top. "Buzz," she said softly, kneeling down to run a trembling hand over his head. "You keep Anna safe, you hear? No matter what happens." Buzz blinked, ears perking. He recognized Harriet's tone, low, serious. He leaned into her hand, as though to reassure her that he was ready. From the ranch's porch, Harriet thought she saw a distant dust cloud, an approaching vehicle. She stared for a moment, heart pounding, but it disappeared. Perhaps it was just a rancher on the dirt roads. But her unease remained. Harriet retreated inside, drew the curtains, and sat in the kitchen, phone in hand, waiting for Anna's next message. Across the desert, the 4 black SUVs idled near the school, time ticking toward the final bell. A storm was about to break over Millbrook, hidden behind the sweltering afternoon heat. School ended at 3:15 p.m., the bell resonating through the halls. Students poured out onto the sidewalks, eager for freedom from the day's lessons. Anna was no exception, strolling out with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Melissa parted ways at the school's front steps, and Anna waved goodbye. Anna's routine was to walk a few blocks to the local grocery store, pick up items if needed, then continue on the footpath to the ranch. Today, Harriet had said she didn't need anything, so Anna planned to head straight home. Her earbuds were already in, a playlist humming. She turned onto the side street, noticing that the 2 SUVs she saw earlier were no longer parked by the main gate. The uneasy feeling returned, making her glance over her shoulder. Nothing. She tried to shrug it off. 2 blocks away from school property, just out of sight from the main road, the trap was sprung. A black SUV sped ahead of her, skidding to a stop at the curb. Another SUV blocked the far end of the street. Ernesto and Jorge jumped out with swift precision. Anna froze, heart hammering, every sense screaming that something was horribly wrong. Before she could run or scream, 2 more men appeared from behind the nearest parked car. One clamped a hand over her mouth, the other seized her arms. Anna's scream became a muffled cry. She struggled, eyes wild with terror, her phone clattering to the pavement. The men overpowered her with practiced ease, dragging her toward the SUV's open door. Cars passed on a main road, but this side street was lonely. No passers-by seemed to notice. Anna tried to bite the hand over her mouth, but the grip tightened. Jorge swiftly pulled out a small syringe, intending to inject a sedative. Anna sensed it, thrashing desperately. Her eyes darted around, panic surging. She aimed a kick at the man holding her arms. She made contact, enough that he grunted and momentarily loosened his grip. Anna inhaled to scream, but then Ernesto swung a pistol, but clipped her on the temple. Stars exploded in her vision, and she felt her strength ebb away. A thick blanket of confusion fell over her. She was vaguely aware of being shoved into the back seat, the SUV's doors slamming shut. The engine roared to life. She blinked, her consciousness spinning. Her ears rang, a dull ache blossomed where she'd been hit. Wind whipped through the open window as the SUV lurched away. Within moments, Anna's phone lay abandoned on the sidewalk, the only sign of her abrupt abduction. The second SUV followed close behind, ensuring no one would chase them. From the vantage point of a small house on the corner, an elderly woman peered out. She had seen enough to understand a young girl was being forced into a vehicle. She reached shakily for her rotary phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. But by the time the operator answered, the SUVs were gone, vanishing into the labyrinth of back roads around Millbrook. And the local authorities, even if they acted swiftly, would find no easy trace of Ernesto's team. Harriet's phone buzzed at 3:30 p.m. She expected a text from Anna, maybe complaining about homework or asking for a ride. Instead, the caller ID displayed an unknown local number. Frowning, Harriet answered. "Hello. Is this Harriet Brooks?" asked a tense female voice. "Yes. I'm calling from the Millbrook Police Department. There's been a report involving your granddaughter, Anna Brooks. We believe she may have been abducted." Harriet's breath caught. She felt the world tilt. "What? Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. A neighbor saw something, and we found a phone matching your granddaughter's on the ground. We're still investigating. We need you to come down to the station if possible, or we can send an officer to your home." Harriet forced herself to speak calmly, though her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I'll come down there immediately." She hung up, mind racing. So it had happened, her worst fear. The cartel must have made their move, zeroing in on Anna to force Harriet's hand. The entire time Harriet had dreaded this possibility, she had still hoped it would never occur. Without hesitating, Harriet grabbed a small go-bag. In it was a few personal defense items, a pepper spray, a concealed carry handgun with extra ammo, and a flash drive containing digital copies of the DEA documents. She also packed a set of old, battered dog tags that belonged to Ghost, partly out of superstition that they might bring luck. The real documents, the originals, remained hidden in the ranch's armoire. Buzz stood by her side, whining softly, sensing the tension. Harriet knelt and slid a wide leather collar around his neck. This was no ordinary collar. It had reinforced sections and small pockets for attachments. Buzz stayed perfectly still, old soldier instincts returning. "We're going to get her," Harriet whispered, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "You understand?" Buzz nudged her hand. He didn't need words to convey that he was ready to follow Harriet into any fire if it meant protecting Anna. Harriet took a deep breath. She locked the house, leaving the manila folder safely secured. The evidence was worthless if she lost Anna. She would do whatever it took to bring her granddaughter back alive, even if it meant handing over the documents. The drive into town felt like an eternity. Harriet's hands tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Buzz gazed out the window, alert, his body language coiled as if expecting a confrontation at any moment. At the Millbrook Police Department, Harriet stormed inside, dog by her side. She demanded to speak to whoever was in charge of Anna's case. A flustered desk sergeant tried to tell her that dogs typically weren't allowed in the station, but the look in Harriet's eyes shut him up immediately, and he led her to a small conference room where a detective waited. The detective was a sandy-haired man in his 40s, wearing a rumpled suit. He introduced himself as Detective Carl Bowen. "Ms. Brooks, I'm so sorry to meet under these circumstances. We're doing everything we can to locate Anna." The witness described 4 men forcing her into a black SUV. "We're collecting camera footage from local businesses, but so far we have limited leads." Harriet swallowed the lump in her throat. She removed a photograph from her purse, one of Anna, bright-eyed and smiling. "Those men are likely affiliated with a Mexican cartel. They took my granddaughter to get something from me." Her voice cracked. "I have reason to believe they'll try to contact me soon." Bowen narrowed his eyes, picking up on the gravity of Harriet's words. "A cartel? Here in Millbrook?" Harriet nodded grimly. "I have some knowledge of their operations. They want me to hand it over. If I cooperate, maybe they'll release her." Buzz sat quietly next to Harriet's chair, but something about his presence radiated a quiet intimidation. Bowen eyed the dog, then looked back at Harriet. "We'll be coordinating with the sheriff's office and possibly the DEA if a cartel is involved. We can put you in protective custody." "No," Harriet said instantly. "I have to be free to negotiate for Anna's release. I appreciate any help, but I can't be locked away while they have her." Bowen hesitated. "All right, but please keep your phone on you at all times. Let us know the moment they contact you. We can try to trace the call or set up a controlled exchange." Harriet nodded, although she doubted local law enforcement was equipped to handle a group of hardened cartel operatives. She stood abruptly. "I need to get back to my ranch in case they contact me." Bowen rose. "We'll have a unit keep an eye on your property." Harriet forced a tight smile, but internally she doubted the police presence would deter professional killers. "Thank you, Detective." With that, Harriet and Buzz exited the station. Outside, Harriet paused on the sidewalk, the intense afternoon sun glaring down. She felt the dryness of the air sting her eyes. Her phone buzzed. She stared at it. The caller ID was a blocked number. Harriet's pulse quickened. She pressed answer and lifted it to her ear. A muffled voice spoke in Spanish-accented English. "Mrs. Brooks, we have your granddaughter. If you want her back, you will do exactly as I say." Harriet's grip tightened on her phone. She scrambled to unlock her car. Buzz, sensing her agitation, hopped into the back seat. Harriet slammed the door, hurriedly starting the engine while the call played over the car's speakerphone. "I'm listening," she managed, voice shaking with equal parts anger and fear. On the line, Ernesto continued calmly, as though he was used to orchestrating such calls. "You have something that belongs to us. Documents. Evidence that can destroy powerful people. You will bring it to a location I will name, or your granddaughter will suffer the consequences." "I'll do it," Harriet blurted, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Just don't hurt her, please." She hesitated. "Can I speak to her? I need proof she's alive." A rustling sound, then Anna's trembling voice came through, barely above a whisper. "Gran, I'm here. Please help me." Her voice was cut off abruptly. Harriet's knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. "Anna?" Ernesto came back on the line. "She is fine for now. In 24 hours, I want you at mile marker 72 on Highway 11. There is an abandoned diner there. Come alone, bring the documents. Any sign of police or a setup and she dies." "Understood." "Yes," Harriet whispered, tears hot in her eyes. "Wait for further instruction once you arrive. And remember, if we suspect a trick, the girl disappears." The call ended. Harriet sat there in a driver's seat, phone clutched against the steering wheel. She could barely breathe. Then, with trembling hands, she dialed Detective Bowen's direct line. By the time he answered, Harriet felt the iron resolve that had helped her survive these past years reassert itself. "They want me to deliver the documents to the old diner on Highway 11 tomorrow. We need a plan." Bowen exhaled audibly on the other end. "We can set up a discreet perimeter, no overt police presence. We'll get a SWAT team on standby. But I need to remind you, Ms. Brooks, these men are dangerous." "I know," Harriet replied, her tone ice cold. "I'll do whatever it takes to get Anna back." She drove home in grim silence, was lying down in the back seat, watchful eyes never leaving her. Once at the ranch, Harriet locked the doors and drew the curtains. She crouched near the armoire, retrieving the hidden manila folder. Her fingers slid across the yellowed edges. She pulled out the topmost documents, scanning them. Bank transfers, incriminating photographs, a spiderweb of connections. Any law enforcement agency with these in hand could deliver a crippling blow to a major cartel network. Her phone lay on the table, an ever-present reminder that one wrong move could end her granddaughter's life. Buzz patted over, pressing his muzzle against Harriet's arm. She exhaled, tears welling up again. "Don't worry, boy," she said, voice quavering. "We'll bring her back." The looming question, should she give everything up to the cartel just to keep Anna safe? Or was there a way to rescue Anna while still ensuring the evidence's safety, and also ensuring the cartel wouldn't simply kill them both afterward? Deep down, Harriet suspected that the moment she handed over the file, they might eliminate her and Anna anyway, tying up loose ends. She needed a different approach, something that would leverage the dog's special skills, the advantage of local law enforcement, and Harriet's own cunning. She placed the documents back in their hiding place, retrieving only a smaller portion of the file, just enough to appear as if it were everything. She then sent a text to Detective Bowen. "I have a plan. I might need your team to intercept, but carefully. Let's meet tonight at my ranch to coordinate." Outside, dusk settled over the desert, painting the horizon in hues of burning orange and dusty pink. Somewhere, in a hidden safe house, Anna was alone, scared, and pinned under the watchful eyes of men who knew no mercy. Harriet felt a surge of hatred for them. They had opened a door that could never be closed. And tomorrow the showdown would begin. Anna awoke in a dimly lit room with metal walls that radiated oppressive heat. Her head throbbed from the blow she'd received. She touched her temple, feeling a bruise already forming. Fear rose inside her like a wave. The last thing she remembered was being dragged into an SUV. She sat on a cot with tattered sheets, wrists bound in front of her with plastic ties. A single overhead bulb flickered. At least her legs were free, but a guard stood by the door, arms folded, a gun visible at his hip. He was a stocky man with a rough complexion, eyes cold as stone. Anna scanned her surroundings. She smelled old oil and dust, concluding they might be in some kind of garage or warehouse. She noticed a grimy window high on the wall, letting in faint moonlight. If she could only get to it. The guard caught her looking up. "Don't try anything," he growled in Spanish-accented English. "You move, I shoot." He tapped his firearm for emphasis. Anna nodded, throat tightening. Despite her fear, a spark of defiance flared in her chest. She looked away, focusing on controlling her breathing. She needed to stay calm to think. Where was she? Possibly on the outskirts of town. She recalled hearing highway sounds in the SUV before everything blurred. Her captors had said they had her grandmother's phone number. They wanted something from Harriet. Anna's chest tightened at the thought of her grandmother being in danger. Yet at the same time, she wanted Harriet to do whatever it took to keep herself safe. Anna's eyes stung with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had to be strong. Hours passed. Another guard replaced the first, bringing Anna a plastic container of water and a stale sandwich. She eyed it warily, but hunger and thirst won out. As she ate, she realized no one had blindfolded her since they arrived. That meant either they didn't care if she saw them, or they had no intention of letting her go. That chilling possibility lingered like a dark cloud in her mind. She thought of her grandmother's ranch, of Buzz, her faithful dog. She wished with all her heart he were there, that she could bury her face in his fur and feel that reassuring weight. She recalled a time he growled and barked when a stranger came to the property, how Harriet had quickly calmed him, but it was clear the dog was fiercely protective of her. She whispered under her breath, "Buzz, I wish you were here." Eventually, the door opened to reveal Ernesto, flanked by Jorge. Ernesto nodded curtly at the guard to leave. Then he fixed Anna with a calculating stare. "We have contacted your grandmother. Tomorrow, she will bring something we need. If she fails, if the police come, or if you try to escape," he lifted a finger as though in warning, "it will go badly for you." Anna swallowed hard, but tried to keep her voice steady. "She'll do what you say. But if you hurt her..." He cut her off with a cold chuckle. "You are in no position to threaten me. Be grateful we keep you alive for now." Ernesto turned to go, and Jorge cast a smirk in her direction. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking. Anna clenched her hands into fists, heart pounding with a mix of fear and righteous anger. She had never felt so helpless. But the image of Harriet and Buzz at the ranch filled her with a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for rescue. Night enveloped the desert, a silent blanket over Millbrook. At Harriet's ranch, a single light glowed in the living room where Detective Bowen and two other officers huddled with Harriet over a hand-drawn map of the abandoned diner on Highway 11. Buzz lay on the floor nearby, ears perked at the gathering's tension. Bowen tapped the map with a pencil. "We'll position a sniper team here on the ridge. 2 unmarked vehicles can be hidden behind these boulders. We'll let you drive in alone to maintain appearances. The moment they move on you or your granddaughter, we close in." Harriet's eyes flicked to the officers. "You have to do it carefully. If they see anything suspicious, they might kill Anna before you can rescue her." Officer Jordan, a stoic woman with short-cropped hair, spoke up. "We have non-lethal options, tasers, beanbag rounds, but if it's a cartel, they'll likely shoot first. We can't guarantee no casualties." Harriet nodded grimly. She'd been around enough violence to understand. "I'll hand them what they think they want." She reached for a smaller folder than the original, but it's incomplete. "I'm hoping they won't discover that until after Anna is out of harm's way." Bowen sighed. "You're aware if they figure out you've tricked them, they might harm you both on the spot." "Yes," Harriet said, swallowing. "But it's the only chance we have to keep them from murdering Anna the moment they have the file. If we give them everything right away, they'll have no reason to keep us alive." Jordan nodded slowly. "We'll do our best to coordinate. But you mentioned your dog might be helpful." Harriet's gaze shifted to Buzz. She'd kept Ghost's real background vague, telling them only that he was a trained protection dog. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a slip of paper. On it were a list of commands, some in German, others in Dutch, some in a specialized code. Buzz Ghost was a military canine, highly trained. He responds to these commands with lethal force if necessary. The officers exchanged surprised looks. Bowen let out a low whistle. "A ward dog?" Harriet nodded. "He's older now, but I know he's still capable." She knelt beside Buzz, letting him sniff the slip of paper with the commands written out. "I don't want to have to use them, but if it's the difference between life and death tomorrow, I'll do it." Bowen rubbed his jaw. "We can incorporate that into the plan. If the dog can create a distraction or subdue a key target, we could spring Anna free." Harriet allowed a faint smile. "Just be careful when he's in that mode. He can be unforgiving." Jordan asked, "What's your approach with Anna once you get her?" Harriet squared her shoulders. "My priority is to get her out of the immediate line of fire. If the cartel tries to pursue us, I'm counting on your people and on Ghost to hold them off." The planning session continued into the early hours. A final strategy took shape. Harriet would arrive alone with Buzz. The police in unmarked units would stay back but remain close enough to respond. Once the cartel showed themselves and offered proof of Anna's safety, Harriet would produce the partial documents. They'd do the exchange. The moment Harriet had Anna, the police would move in, carefully but swiftly. It was a risky gambit. The cartel might arrive with overwhelming force or have eyes out for any sign of police. Harriet knew that their best hope lay in surprise and the dog's unexpected presence. Finally, the officers left, promising to rendezvous an hour before the designated time. Harriet locked up, triple-checking doors and windows. She felt exhausted but knew sleep would not come easily. In her bedroom, she set an alarm for dawn. Buzz settled on the floor beside her bed, watchful. Harriet whispered into the darkness, "We'll get her back, old boy. We have to." The next day's sun rose bright and merciless over the desert. Harriet, nerves taut, prepared for the confrontation. She dressed in sturdy jeans, boots, and a light jacket that concealed her holstered handgun. Buzz wore his reinforced collar, and Harriet added a small patch of cloth that read "Service Dog" to minimize suspicion. She packed the partial file into a plain leather bag and checked her phone for messages. Detective Bowen texted, "We're in position. Good luck." At precisely noon, Harriet drove her old pickup along Highway 11, Buzz sitting stoically in the passenger seat. The landscape stretched endless on either side, dry scrub brush and towering cacti. The midday heat shimmered on the asphalt. Every mile marker she passed heightened her anxiety. When she reached mile marker 72, she spotted the abandoned diner, its sign half collapsed, windows boarded up. The parking lot was empty except for one black SUV parked near the entrance. Harriet pulled in, her heart pounding, so loud she wondered if Buzz could hear it. She turned off the engine, took a moment to breathe. Then she got out, instructing Buzz to heel. Together, they approached the SUV. A man stepped out, Jorge, wearing sunglasses and a menacing grin. "Where is Anna?" Harriet demanded, her voice trembling with controlled fury. Jorge jerked his head toward the diner. "Inside. You have what we asked for." Harriet held up the leather bag. "Yes, take me to her." Jorge smirked, gesturing for Harriet to follow him. "You and the dog stay close. No sudden moves." They walked across the dusty lot to the diner's door. Harriet glanced around. She spotted another SUV idling behind the building, likely with more armed men. No sign of local law enforcement. She prayed Detective Bowen was hidden somewhere just out of sight. Inside, stale air and old grease smells lingered. The booths were covered in dust. A few broken chairs lay scattered. At the far end of the diner, Anna sat slumped in a corner booth, guarded by two cartel members with rifles. Her eyes lit up with relief when she saw Harriet and Buzz. "Gran," she cried, trying to rise, but the guard pushed her back into the booth. Harriet's breath caught, seeing the bruise on Anna's temple. She turned to Jorge. "I brought the documents. Now let her go." Ernesto emerged from behind the counter, stepping forward with a quiet authority. He gestured at Harriet's bag. "Show me." Harriet carefully opened the bag, pulling out a stack of papers. Ernesto snatched them, flipping through, scanning the incriminating data. Satisfied for the moment, he nodded to the guard. "Untie the girl." Anna's wrists were freed, and she rushed to Harriet, hugging her fiercely. Tears shimmered in Anna's eyes. Harriet held her granddaughter, relief flooding her. Buzz stood at Harriet's side, tail wagging once, but posture still rigid. Ernesto snapped his fingers, addressing Harriet. "This is all of it?" Harriet nodded, voice cold. "Everything I have." One of Ernesto's men, a wiry figure with a laptop, stepped forward and began scanning a few pages. Harriet's stomach churned with dread. If they discovered that the file was incomplete, everything would unravel too soon. She glanced at Buzz, tensing. The dog's ears were pricked up, sensing the building tension. Outside, Harriet knew the police must be preparing for their move. She hoped they'd time it right. If they burst in too soon, it could spark a shootout with Anna in the crossfire. Ernesto closed the folder. "We'll be leaving now." He flicked a hand dismissively toward Harriet and Anna. "Lucky for you, we're in a generous mood. Our boss has decided to spare you." Harriet's gut twisted. She knew better than to take Ernesto at his word. Sure enough, a moment later he raised his gun. "But we can't have you running to the cops." Before Harriet could blink, Ernesto fired a shot at the floor near Harriet's feet. Anna screamed, jumping back. Buzz let out a sharp bark, hackles raised. Ernesto smirked. "Get rid of them," he told his men. "Make it quiet." Then he turned to walk away, the file clutched in his hand. The two guards with rifles moved in, raising their weapons. It was now or never. Harriet had no choice. "Ghost," she shouted, her voice echoing. She barked a single word in duck fast, a command that meant attack in his old training. Buzz Ghost launched forward with startling speed. His transformation from loyal pet to lethal war dog was instantaneous. Before the guards could react, he sprang at the nearest man's rifle arm, jaws clamping down with crushing force. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. Buzz twisted, yanking the guard to the ground, teeth embedded in the man's forearm. The second guard aimed his rifle at the dog, but Harriet had already drawn her concealed handgun. She fired once, the bullet catching the guard in the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl. Anna dove for cover under a nearby booth, hands pressed to her mouth. Ernesto wheeled around, cursing in Spanish. He fired wildly at Harriet, who ducked behind the old diner counter. Buzz still pinned the first guard, who had resorted to punching the dog's head in desperation. The dog would not relent, muzzle stained with the guard's blood, eyes locked in unwavering focus. Shots rang out from outside. Detective Bowen's voice boomed, "Police, drop your weapons." Chaos exploded. Cartel members in the parking lot fired at the unmarked police vehicles. Officers returned fire, bullets pinging off the diner's metal frames. Ernesto's men realized they were caught in a pincer, but they weren't going down without a fight. Inside the diner, Harriet maneuvered around the counter, aiming carefully at Ernesto as he took cover behind an overturned table. She squeezed off 2 shots that missed by inches, the bullets splintering wood. Ernesto popped up to return fire, forcing Harriet to duck. The standoff left them both pinned. Anna crawled to a better vantage point, heart pounding. She watched in both horror and awe as Buzz continued to subdue one guard, then, at Harriet's next command, pivoted to leap onto the second guard who was now trying to raise his rifle again. The dog lunged, teeth bared. The guard screamed as Buzz latched onto his arm, forcing the muzzle away from Harriet and Anna. Ernesto saw his men flailing, and decided to make a break for it. Clutching the stolen file, he sprinted toward the back exit. Harriet saw him dart away. She glanced at Anna. "Stay here," Harriet ordered. She whistled sharply, and Buzz, hearing the signal, released the second guard. The man slumped, clutching his shredded arm. The dog turned toward Harriet, awaiting the next directive. "Ghost come," Harriet cried, rushing after Ernesto. With Anna momentarily safe, Harriet was determined to reclaim those documents and prevent Ernesto from escaping. She pushed through the diner's kitchen, navigating broken appliances and shattered windows. At the back exit, Ernesto kicked open the door, firing wildly at a policeman who tried to intercept him. The officer dove behind a trash bin, bullets ricocheting off metal. Ernesto sprinted across the dirt lot, heading for the second SUV, engine running. He was mere seconds from escape. Harriet emerged, pistol in hand. She aimed, but Ernesto ducked behind the SUV's door, returning fire. Her shot went wide. She dove behind a stack of pallets, frustration mounting. Time was running out. Then she remembered she wasn't alone. "Ghost through it," Harriet yelled, the command that told Buzz to go forward and engage. The Belgian Malinois streaked past Harriet, bounding around the pallets, focusing on Ernesto like a laser. Ernesto saw the dog coming, eyes widening in panic. He managed to fire a single shot that whizzed past Buzz, missing him by a hair's breadth. In a heartbeat, Buzz was on him, jaws latching onto Ernesto's forearm. Ernesto howled in agony, dropping the pistol. The dog wrenched his arm, forcing Ernesto to his knees. The folder spilled from his grip, pages scattering across the dusty ground. Screams rent the air. Harriet rushed forward, snatching her documents, relief flooding through her. Ernesto thrashed, face contorted with pain as the dog bore down. Police sirens grew louder as additional units arrived, cornering the cartel men who remained. Detective Bowen appeared from the side, shouting, "Police, don't move." He leveled his weapon at Ernesto, but saw that Buzz had the situation well in hand, rather well in jaw. Ernesto groaned, eyes filled with a deadly mixture of pain and hatred as Harriet stood over him, documents clutched tight. She locked eyes with him. "I told you," she said calmly, "you'd regret coming after my family." Bowen carefully approached, training his gun on Ernesto. "Stand down, Harriet. We'll handle him." Harriet whistled. Buzz released Ernesto's arm, stepping back with a low growl. The cartel operative collapsed, clutching his bleeding limb. Backup officers rushed in, slapping cuffs on him and dragging him away. Harriet sank to her knees, exhaustion and emotion catching up. Anna raced around a corner, calling for her. They embraced, hearts pounding with relief that both were alive. Buzz pressed his nose against Anna's leg, tail giving a single wag. Anna buried her hand in his fur, tears streaking her cheeks. All suspects accounted for, an officer shouted, "We have them disarmed." The diner lot was a haze of dust, sirens, and police lights. Ambulances arrived for the wounded. Harriet held Anna close, glancing at Buzz, who stood watchful and uninjured aside from some minor scrapes. She whispered a prayer of gratitude. The dog that once lurked like a ghost in the mountains of Afghanistan had again saved lives. This time, the lives of the family who'd taken him in. Within the hour, the scene outside the diner swarmed with law enforcement. Detective Bowen coordinated efforts, ensuring medics treated wounded officers and cartel members. A handful of local news reporters gathered, hungry for a story. Harriet kept her distance from the cameras, exhausted and distraught. Anna sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a blanket draped over her shoulders despite the desert heat. She sipped from a water bottle, trembling but physically unharmed. Harriet stood beside her, gently rubbing Anna's back. Buzz lay at their feet, calm despite the chaotic environment. Detective Bowen approached, removing his hat and wiping his brow. "Ms. Brooks, I'm glad you're both safe." "Thank you," Harriet said softly, offering a weary smile. Bowen's gaze rested on Buzz. That dog's a hero. We might have lost more officers if he hadn't intervened inside. Anna nodded, reaching to scratch Buzz's ears. I had no idea he could do that. Harriet exchanged a glance with Anna, recognizing the confusion in her granddaughter's eyes. We'll talk about it when we get home, Harriet murmured. There's a lot to explain. Bowen cleared his throat. We'll need statements from you both. And we'll probably have to keep that evidence in our chain of custody. Harriet looked at the battered folder. Of course, but I'd prefer to hand it directly to the DEA. My husband sacrificed much to collect this. I want to make sure it leads to real charges against the cartel leaders. Bowen nodded solemnly. Understood. We'll coordinate with them. In the meantime, you might want to keep a low profile. Even though we arrested these men, the cartel may not give up. Harriet sighed, shoulders sagging. I know, but at least for now, Anna is safe. A paramedic approached, offering to check Harriet for any injuries. Harriet waved her off with a kind thank you, only accepting a quick once-over. She had no bullet wounds, just bruises and the aftershocks of adrenaline. Anna was similarly assessed, and aside from the bruise on her head and a few scrapes, she was physically fine. The next few hours passed in a blur of police reports, statements, and eventually a quiet ride home under a police escort. Harriet drove her old truck with Anna in the passenger seat, Buzz in the back. Both women stared out the windshield, too drained to talk. Finally, Harriet pulled into the ranch, an officer following behind to stand guard. They entered the house, familiar scents and the hum of the old refrigerator welcoming them. Harriet locked the door behind him, leaning her forehead against the wood. Anna touched her shoulder gently. Anna began, voice trembling with a swirl of emotions. What just happened? Harriet turned, meeting Anna's gaze. She exhaled slowly, then guided her granddaughter to the living room couch. Sit down, honey. I owe you the truth about Buzz, and about me. Buzz settled on the rug at Anna's feet, as though sensing this conversation was important. Harriet found a worn photograph in a desk drawer, an image of a younger Harriet, her late husband, and 2 DA agents at some border checkpoint decades ago. She handed the photo to Anna. Your grandfather was a DEA informant who helped uncover cartel operations along the border. He gathered evidence, stored it, and used it to help the agency arrest key players. When he passed away, I inherited the evidence. The cartel suspected as much. I was told by a close friend in the DEA that I'd never be safe unless they were taken down completely. She paused, her face distant. That's why I've been so protective, so cautious. Anna listened, what? So the folder they wanted was actually that evidence? Harriet nodded. I never told you because I thought it was safer for you not to know. But they found out about us eventually. Anna took a shaky breath. And Buzz? Harriet smiled fondly at the dog. His real name is Ghost. He's a retired military K-9 with an elite unit. He served in Afghanistan, saved countless lives, and has a very particular set of skills. When I had the chance to adopt him, I knew he could protect us if the worst ever happened. She spread her hands apologetically. I just never wanted you to be caught up in that violence. Anna looked down at Buzz, gently stroking his fur. I can't believe he's been through so much. All those times I just thought he was an old rescue dog who liked napping in the sun. A soft laugh escaped Harriet, though tears welled in her eyes. He's more than earned those naps. They lapsed into silence for a moment, the weight of the past day's events settling around them. Anna spoke quietly. I'm sorry you had to carry that burden alone. Harriet reached over, took Anna's hand. I'm just glad you're safe. The only thing that matters to me is that you survived this. And you have Ghost to thank, too. Buzz looked up, tilting his head. Anna leaned down, kissing the top of his head. Thank you, Buzz. Ghost. She lingered on the name, tasting the gravity it held. Harriet rubbed her face wearily. Detective Bowen warned we might still not be safe. The cartel could send more people. We're going to have to decide if we want to relocate, maybe enter a witness protection program, or find some way to stay here and remain vigilant. Anna glanced around the old ranch, eyes filling with tears. Leave our home? This place is all we've known. Harriet sighed. I know, dear, but your life is worth more than any property. If they come after us again, we might not get so lucky. Anna's chin trembled. She said nothing for a moment, then quietly, if we do have to run, we bring Buzz with us, right? Harriet pulled Anna into a hug. Absolutely. We're family. The dog lifted his head, letting out a small sound as if in agreement. 2 days later, Harriet found herself sitting at the local DEA field office. Outside, a scorching sun battered the streets. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the sparse decor. Anna waited in the lobby with a uniformed officer keeping watch over her. Buzz lay at her feet, calm but vigilant, ignoring the stares from passers-by. Harriet sat across from Special Agent Delgado, a seasoned DEA agent who had known Harriet's late husband. Delgado reviewed the salvage documents, eyebrows arching in surprise at their completeness. Harriet, this is potent evidence. It names not just mid-level operatives, but higher-ups. If properly leveraged, it could dismantle an entire branch of the cartel. Harriet inclined her head solemnly. That's what my husband intended. Now that these men made their move, I'd like to see justice done. But you need to protect Anna and me. Delgado sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. We can push for witness protection. But, Harriet, these organizations have long memories. It might be best for you to accept relocation under a new identity. Harriet's chest tightened at the thought of leaving Millbrook, the ranch, the only life Anna had known. But she nodded. If it means saving Anna's life, we'll do whatever we must. Delgado closed the file. I'll expedite the process. In the meantime, local police will keep an eye on your property. The men you captured have already flipped on some of their associates, trying to reduce charges. The cartel is wounded, but not dead. They might lash out in retaliation. Harriet pursed her lips. We won't take any chances. She rose to leave, shaking Delgado's hand. Thank you, Agent. Outside, Anna looked up anxiously. Harriet gave her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. Let's go home, honey. They returned to the ranch under police escort. Harriet's mind whirled with thoughts of uprooting their lives, leaving behind old memories. Despite the heartbreak, Harriet knew the cost of staying might be too high. Still, she hadn't committed to anything officially. She needed time to process, to talk it over with Anna. That evening, Harriet and Anna sat around the dining table, plates of untouched food between them. Buzz lay under the table, resting his head on Anna's feet. The tension was palpable. A knock at the door startled them both. Harriet went to check, hand on her holstered pistol. Through the peephole, she saw a middle-aged woman in a neat pantsuit, accompanied by Detective Bowen. Harriet opened the door warily. Ms. Brooks, said the woman, extending a business card. I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Regina Collins. Detective Bowen briefed me on your situation. Harriet stepped aside, letting them enter. Anna stood, arms crossed protectively. Collins smiled gently. I'm here to inform you that we're seeking federal charges against the men who abducted Anna. The evidence you provided will significantly bolster the case. The United States Attorney's Office can arrange witness protection if you so choose. Bowen nodded in agreement. We're in your corner, Harriet. But it's your call. Anna's eyes flicked between them. Anxiety etched on her features. Harriet laid a hand on her granddaughter's arm. We're still deciding. Collins nodded. I understand. I just wanted to personally assure you that if you enter the program, you'll be relocated under a new identity. The government will support you financially for a period. Anna can finish her education under that new identity, safe from reprisal. Harriet exhaled, glancing at the worn family photographs on the walls. "This place, my husband built so much of it with his own hands." Colin's face softened. "I'm sorry truly, but sometimes a new start is necessary. The cartel is ruthless. They could strike again." Bowen placed a reassuring hand on Harriet's shoulder. "If it helps, we'll keep an enhanced patrol here for a while. But I can't promise indefinite protection." Harriet thanked them, and they left after a brief conversation. Anna slumped into a chair, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. "I can't believe we might have to leave forever." Harriet wrapped her arms around Anna, holding her close. "I know, sweetie, but I won't risk losing you." Buzz nudged Anna's leg, whining softly in sympathy. Anna sniffed, managing a shaky smile at the dog. "I'm sorry, boy. I'm just scared." Harriet closed her eyes, silent for a long moment. "We'll give it a few days, see if anything else comes up. But I think we both know what the safest option is." Anna nodded, wiping her cheeks. Despite her dread at leaving Millbrook, she knew Harriet was right. Morning broke in a haze of dusty sunlight. Harriet prepared a small breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, though neither she nor Anna had much appetite. The tension lay thick in the air. A phone call interrupted the quiet. Harriet glanced at the screen. Detective Bowen. She answered, dread already twisting her stomach. "Yes." Bowen's voice was grim. "Harriet, I just received intel from one of our informants. We have reason to believe a hit squad might be heading your way. The cartel wants revenge for the ambush at the diner." Harriet gripped the phone, knuckles turning white. "How soon?" "Could be hours, could be days. My advice is to pack a bag and move to a safe house immediately. We'll escort you." She glanced at Anna, who overheard enough to understand. Anna paled. Harriet nodded into the phone. "We'll do it. Please send officers." Within an hour, 2 police cars arrived, escorting Harriet, Anna, and Buzz away from the ranch. Harriet locked the door with a heavy heart, unsure if she would ever return. Anna clutched Buzz's collar as they walked to the waiting vehicles. A short drive later, they arrived at a modest motel on the outskirts of town. The police had secured a couple of rooms, stationed an officer nearby. Harriet closed the blinds, checking every window. "We're safe here for now," she told Anna. The younger woman sat on the bed, hugging her knees, Buzz beside her. That night, Harriet barely slept. She kept the lamp on, pistol within reach. Every passing car in the parking lot set her nerves on edge. Just before dawn, Harriet woke to a piercing sound, gunfire outside. She bolted upright, heart racing. Anna jerked awake, fear flooding her eyes. Buzz leaped from the bed, poised at the door, growling low in his throat. Harriet moved to the window, carefully peeking out. She saw muzzle flashes in the parking lot, police lights flickering in chaotic patterns. One of the escorts was pinned down behind a squad car, exchanging shots with men in a dark sedan. A bullet shattered the motel window next door. Harriet yanked Anna to the floor, covering her head. Buzz barked, nails scraping the carpet in agitation. "We have to get out of here," Harriet whispered, adrenaline surging. She crawled to the nightstand, grabbing her phone. She dialed Bowen's number with trembling fingers, but the call wouldn't connect. Probably jammed or out of service in the chaos. Shots hammered the night air. The policeman outside returned fire, but Harriet saw at least 3 armed men approaching. They wore dark clothes, faces partially covered. One pointed a rifle at the squad car. The policeman shouted something, then fired again, but the assailants pressed forward, driven by a ruthless determination. Harriet realized they were outnumbered. She made a split-second decision. "Anna, we go now." She and Anna scrambled to the back window of the motel room. Harriet wrenched it open, sliding the glass up. Buzz squeezed through first, followed by Anna. Harriet crawled out, heart pounding. They found themselves behind the motel, a weed-choked alley leading away. Suddenly, headlights flared. Another car screeched into the alley, blocking their path. Harriet froze, gun at the ready. Two men jumped out, raising their firearms. Before Harriet could fire, one man's weapon spat muzzle flashes. Harriet ducked, dragging Anna down. Bullets thudded into the motel's wall. Buzz charged forward, but Harriet grabbed his collar just in time to keep him from running straight into the line of fire. They were pinned. Harriet's mind raced, searching for a way out. Then, from the side, a roar of an engine. Another vehicle, a battered pickup truck, barreled into the alley, colliding with a gunman's car. Metal crunched, glass shattered. The gunmen were thrown off balance. Detective Bowen leaned out of the pickup's driver window, pistol in hand, firing on the startled attackers. "Get in," he shouted. Harriet, Anna, and Buzz sprinted for the pickup. Bullets whizzed past, one smashing the pickup's side mirror. Bowen returned fire, wounding one attacker, who collapsed with a cry. The second attacker dove behind the smashed sedan. Harriet flung open the pickup's door, pushing Anna inside. Buzz leaped in, Harriet following. Bowen hit the gas, tires squealing as they thundered down the alley, leaving the chaos behind. They drove for over an hour, taking back roads across the desert, hearts pounding, hands shaking. Eventually, they pulled up to a remote cabin, half hidden by mesquite trees. Bowen killed the engine. The hush of the desert night settled around them. "This is a departmental safe house," Bowen explained, panting. "I couldn't let them corner you at that motel. We lost good men tonight." Harriet swallowed, her eyes stinging with tears. "Thank you. You saved us." Bowen nodded somberly. "We need to report in. But this place is off-grid, no cell signal. There's a landline inside." He hesitated. "We have to assume the cartel knows we're serious now. They'll come at you with everything they have if they can find you." Harriet exchanged a glance with Anna, whose face was pale. "So we stay here then?" Bowen shrugged. "For the night, at least. Then I'll coordinate a more permanent relocation. The U.S. Attorney's Office can expedite your new identities." Anna sank onto a worn sofa in the cabin, exhaustion etched into her posture. Buzz sat beside her, resting his head on her lap. Harriet paced, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "I can't believe it came to this," she said quietly, tears finally slipping free. "It's not fair." Bowen placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Sometimes doing the right thing has a price." Harriet nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked at Anna, swallowing hard as she steeled herself. "We'll do whatever it takes. We'll go into witness protection. These monsters can't keep hunting us like this." Anna's voice was soft but resolute. "We stick together." "Always," Harriet agreed, kneeling to hug her granddaughter. Buzz nuzzled Harriet's side. Though their future lay shrouded in uncertainty, one thing was clear: they still had each other. 2 days later, arrangements had been made. Harriet and Anna would be taken to a federal facility where they would finalize the witness protection process. Buzz, too, would come with them. Harriet insisted on that without compromise. The authorities recognized the dog's role in saving multiple lives and allowed it. Harriet stood in front of the ranch house one last time alone. Anna waited in the car with a police escort, not wanting to face the heartbreak of farewell. Harriet walked the dusty porch, running her hand along the wooden railing. Memories flickered, family gatherings, nights reading to Anna by lamplight, early mornings feeding chickens. Tears welled in her eyes again. She stooped down, picking up an old horseshoe from the porch. A keepsake, she decided. Her gaze lifted to the horizon. Dusty roads, open desert, a blazing sun. This land had shaped her life. Now she had to leave it behind. She inhaled a trembling breath, setting the horseshoe in her bag. Stepping back inside the ranch for the last time, she took a final look at the living room, the worn couch, the pictures on the wall. Then she opened the armoire, checking the secret compartment. Empty, She had turned over every last piece of the evidence to the DA. That chapter was done. She closed the armoire gently. "Goodbye," she whispered to the silent house. Outside, Detective Bowen waited beside a black SUV. He gave Harriet a sympathetic smile as she approached. "Ready?" Harriet nodded. "As I'll ever be." She climbed into the back seat with Anna and Buzz. The engine hummed, and they pulled away from the ranch. Harriet watched through the rear window as the only home she'd known for decades receded into the distance, the desert swallowing it in dust and fading light. Months passed. Harriet and Anna were now living in a small town far from the border, under new identities. Anna enrolled in a local community college, quietly focusing on her studies. Harriet took part-time work at a library under an assumed name. Buzz, still officially Ghost in certain circles, remained their constant companion. They had a modest rental house, plain but comfortable. At night, Harriet sometimes woke with nightmares of masked gunmen, of gunshots echoing through dusty lots. Anna struggled too, nightmares of her abduction plaguing her. But they consoled each other and found hope in each new day. Every so often, Harriet heard updates from the DA through a specially arranged contact. The cartel cell responsible for Anna's kidnapping had been largely dismantled, with key figures facing federal prosecution. Some walked free on technicalities, such was the messy nature of the system. But Harriet's evidence had crippled much of the organization's local influence. On a crisp autumn evening, Harriet and Anna took Buzz for a walk through the quiet suburban neighborhood. Leaves crunched underfoot, a pleasant chill in the air. They passed smiling neighbors who waved politely, unaware of the extraordinary events that had led to these three living among them. Anna stuffed her hands into her jacket pockets, glancing at Harriet. "Do you think we'll ever go back to the ranch?" Harriet sighed, looking up at the setting sun. "I don't know, honey. Maybe someday, when it's truly safe. But for now, we have each other and Ghost. That's enough." Anna nodded, a sad smile tugging at her lips. She'd been down to pet Buzz. "I'm just glad we made it out alive. Some people don't." Harriet's throat tightened. "Me too." They walked in companionable silence, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves and the soft pant of the dog by their side. Ghost had truly become part of their family, bridging the gap between their old life and the new. His watchful gaze never ceased, a reminder that vigilance had saved them once and might be needed again. Reaching the house, Harriet unlocked the door. Inside, the living room was modest but cozy. On the wall, they had a single picture from the ranch days, one that didn't give away too many details, just Harriet, Anna, and Buzz standing on the porch. It was a quiet homage to where they came from. Anna headed to her room to study. Harriet removed her jacket, pausing to watch the dog curl up on his dog bed near the fireplace. She walked over, kneeling beside him. Buzz looked up, ears perked. Harriet rubbed his head affectionately. "You know," she whispered, voice hitching slightly, "I used to wish you'd never have to see violence again, that you could just be a regular dog. But you saved us, old boy. You saved us all." Buzz rested his head against her hand, eyes conveying a world of loyalty and understanding. Harriet sighed, feeling a small measure of peace settle in her chest. The future was uncertain, but they had survived. Together, they had escaped the deadly grip of the cartel. And though the scars remained, both physical and emotional, they carried on, buoyed by the bond between a grandmother, a granddaughter, and a retired war dog with the heart of a warrior.